Thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Barry Erickson, and I'm Community Engagement Coordinator at Wheaton Public Library. Tonight, we are delighted to bring you tonight's art demonstration in partnership with the DuPage Art League. Founded 63 years ago, the DuPage Art League is committed to the arts in bringing enriching programming to art lovers throughout our community. Located on Front Street in downtown Wheaton, the DuPage Art League is both a school and gallery. They are dedicated to promoting and encouraging the visual arts through classes, workshops, gallery exhibits, and free public fine arts programs. Their classes and workshops cover a wide variety of mediums and are designed for all ages. The beautiful storefront gallery and gift shop is open to the public. We are grateful to the DuPage Art League for arranging tonight's demonstration by acclaimed portrait artist Don Yang. Don has a master's degree with emphasis in fine art and traditional illustration from the American Academy of Art in Chicago. He has been teaching drawing, artistic anatomy, plein air, and oil painting in and around Chicago for the past 23 years. Don paints outdoors as well as in his studio in the historic Fine Arts Building in Chicago. He frequently exhibits his work, and his paintings and drawings are collected by art enthusiasts throughout the United States and Europe. Currently, his one-person exhibit, Intimate Portraits, portrait paintings of students and colleagues, is on display in the Fine Arts Gallery in downtown Chicago. Tonight, Don will demonstrate direct painting, or Alla Prima, from a live model. He will emphasize capturing accurate proportion, the form of the head, and facial color variations. These techniques create a convincing likeness in an oil sketch within a limited period of time. So with that, I'm anxious to turn the screen over to you, Don.
Hello, thank you for inviting me to the DuPage Art League to this demo, Sue and Barry and the Wheaton Public Library. So I'm going to be doing what's generally called the head study, not necessarily full-blown portraiture, but trying to get the essence of the human head structure and character in rather realistic manner. So it usually takes about 3 hours. So probably I'll get basic blockings and done, and then I can work off of it later on further detail. And so it'll be about 2 hours, and I was asked to discuss some of my colors and equipments and so on. So I'm going to go over very briefly on that, starting off with my colors. This is my palette, and I arranged cool colors one side and warm colors on the top side there for both in my portrait or the landscape painting. I usually try to put two temperatures of one color, such as this is cobalt blue color, relatively cooler blue than, say, ultramarine blue color, which is very deep, dark, and slightly warmer. And I have alizarin crimson, slightly cooler and very deep, dark, the red. And this is cadmium red color. I don't use cadmium red as often, but I like to use different colors sometimes. So I'm going to try to use that more often, especially my figure painting. I would use transparent oxide red right here, which is a replacement for me, burnt sienna. And the yellow wise, I have two yellows of cadmium red and cadmium yellow and cadmium yellow, either pale or light. I had yellow ochre. Sometimes cadmium yellows can be too dominant when I mix with, say, cadmium red or very intense colors, and I may reach out for yellow ochre, not as intense. This one happens to be the yellow ochre light. Most of my colors come from Winsor and Newton brand, but their brand of yellow ochre is really too deep and dark for me, and also it dries a bit too fast for me. So I chose cadmium yellow, the yellow ochre light, or sometimes pale. And I have one, the secondary color of this, in this case, the Viridian. In my landscape paint, I may add different greens, but Viridian generally works well for me for figure painting or portrait painting. And Sometimes I may use black if there's a black object that I need to start off with black, or sometimes also black and yellows can mix very nice the warm gray, warm greens as well. So that's general palette here, but sometimes I take out some or add some. Sometimes I may add cerulean blue, especially in figure painting. There's a cadmium red. Sometimes I use it, not use it. Sometimes I may use also terrosa as well. My support substrate is concerned. It is the Belgian linen Clausen brand number 13 portrait grade, very fine grade. I also use this portrait grade canvas for my landscape painting often. Very sensitive, very delicate, and very fine quality. So I really enjoy working on this canvas. Now today I brought two different canvases. One is just stark white, and I have another one that I brought that was already toned, and I was debating in the beginning, but I'm gonna try just working in stark white canvas for now for this painting. I could have used easily the other paint canvas as well, but seeing very intense color that our model here is wearing today, I thought maybe I would lay down some very strong colors from the beginning against stark white background as opposed to more muted background of the other canvas there. So that, and as far as medium is concerned, I use a turquoise to clean my brush, and I also have the medium that is more traditional, simple medium, a mixture of the turf and linseed. Well, this one is the commercial medium from gambling company they call Neo Meggio. Supposed to be a safer version of old Maro J medium that is known to be to some people it's toxic. So they came up with a medium. On occasion, I use that. It works nicely as far as the keeping my flow very smooth, and also seems to be working against the overly flattening out of the color when it gets sunken in. So sometimes I use that as well. So with that, I'm going to start off with some basic colors. Now, there's so many different ways one can paint, and this is something I tell my younger students, especially beginning oil painting students. The way I paint is one of so many ways one can paint. There are so many people paint so many different ways and come up with wonderful work. It's just something that the way the method seems to be working for me past a number of years. So it may even sound contradictory to some other method, some other great the artist's work. So just to tell you that it just happens to be a very personal choice and personal way of me working in this manner. And even my working method, sometimes I would work very academic manner with a very strong emphasis in the drawing, laying out the drawing very carefully. Or sometimes, especially when time is short, I may just go right into the color from the very beginning. Now, having this time period less than 2 hours, probably that's the method I'm going to use to go right into a splash of color from the very beginning, and I'll work my drawing while I'm working with the color. So that's the general method that you'll see that I'm going to be using. So clearly, the blue really stands out. So I mix some the cobalt blue, and I loosened up with lots of turf, and just to break up the such a stark canvas whiteness to it, I'm just gonna throw some into that just roughly, just to keep it on shape. One of the nice things about oil painting is, of course, any of this, if mistake I made that I do not like, I can always wipe it and clean it up. Or sometimes they can work out nicely happy accidents. If that happens, I just work with that. But I just like to lay down some very strong colors that she has, including her hair color to begin with. And then I'm focusing more on a silhouette, the shape of that, and then I work off of that. And the green is also a very strong color. She came in, I asked her to throw that shoulders, and it's also really showing up. It's very strong color to it. I'm going to throw that, I'm going to frame the face there. Now, being exact same color is not that important at stage. I just like to break up this stark white and acquaint my eye to colors that I see, very dominant color. Start blocking. This can be I'm going to use cadmium red and yellow ochre mixture. Very warm, body complexion. And I also pre-mixed the neutralizing color, as I call it, of purple and light green, and also in two different values. That way, if this color is too intense, I can always neutralize it with by reaching out to either purple or green. I mean, I could mix as I go, but just having available right on the palette, it really helps me to get readily those color on my canvas. Now, in the beginning, you saw things got a little fast, but as I go a little further on, that's when I'm going to be much more mindful of drawing accuracy. Decisively, carefully. So I'm pretty much blocking in the shapes of light against the shadow. So I'm doing the drawing with brush and color. Even though the light bulb I'm using is relatively cool light bulb, but still it's quite warm compared to, say, natural light. So cool shadow, cool temperature shadow, I'm going to throw in. Taking full advantage of all painting that I can always raise or lower the temperature on top of it. So, of course, I'm doing my best to make it as accurate as I can, but mostly I'm going after accurate drawing. In the beginning, it looks quite rough, even to me sometimes. So I didn't paint this way for many, many years when I was a student, even after I worked professionally. I didn't get to work this manner until later on when I became more confident about my drawing, where I can fix things better. So I'm also attacking, so to speak, the planes, facial area by plane the broad strokes. Having some cool temperature on the side and the jaw area, so I'm using big brush to lay out as boldly as I can. It comes down to all about making those shapes right. Squinting my eyes frequently to keep things simple, and then I don't be drawing into smaller shapes or large shapes. So anytime I see some color changes, the temperature changes from the color, try to if you can sneak those in, but at the same time, without overly doing it and then end up breaking things down too much. Here, coolness to it, even slight green. As long as I can maintain the proper value relationship, I can pretty much lay down any color and make it work. So that's the importance of fundamentals, of getting the right value. Indulge myself with so many different colors if I want. Shapes carefully. Boundary for the eye socket. Here. Here. All about drawing at this stage. Block it in with shadow shape. Let's generalize larger shape. Then I can always come back. Give some shape. Whenever I lay down the eyes, I always try to work them as simultaneously as I can. And of course, at some point, I have to zero in one eye, but until then, anything we have two, I like to work them together as simultaneously as I can. That always happens in the figure painting as well, whether it be arms, legs, anything. Two of them, I try to, just maintaining the relationship by not focusing on one area while completely missing out the other. That way, you avoid the situation where you may end up have a very nice one eye, but then it is not making sense with the other eye and so on. So for now, we'll do that much. This is a time I generally like to contain the features and bypass and move on to others instead of being stuck in one area too much. That time will come soon enough. For now, what I find it more important here is having these features, eyes and nose, mouth, maintaining their relationship with other features, rather than doing one very well and not in proportion or not in proper. Position and shape of the mouth. So much is drawn particularly at this stage. But drawing never stops. Drawing comes in the form of paint. This is not all covered with a neck there. Okay. Keep a complete frame for her face, her head. I'm taking advantage of the hair and hat. Here. And negatively drawing the contour of her left side of the face. Bring the value between her hair and her right side, the shadow side, as tight, as close to begin with. I can always pull out warmer temperature or lighter value on her right side if I want to, but probably I would not want to, because that's the shadow side. I want that side nicely recede instead of coming up forward. So I'm going to start off with a tighter contrast than what I can see when I keep my eyes wide open. So this is the kind of value relationship I see when I squint my eyes. And then just like the face, just like this one. Mix them up a little bit. It's okay. Cool. One thing I should be doing more often is I should step away from my paint or lean back more often. It takes a little more yellowish appearance. That's when I mixed in yellow ochre, and if that's not enough, then I inch up a little bit further by mixing in some green. So yellow ochre is such a nice color, kind of works as a bridge between yellow and green. So that's what I see right around here. And if I want this painting more colorful, coloristic, then I can push more obvious green like this here. As I find my brush, I'm really liking this feel of a brush sliding over this canvas. That's one of the many things I like about this canvas. Chin is like be careful not to make it too light and then end up protruding too much. So let's frame up one part of the face. And painting wet and wet is so nice when you try to create softer brush stroke transitions. If it's not soft enough, I can always, of course, come back later on, use a nice soft hair brush in dry brush technique. Even without it, you get a nice soft edge quality now. So painting wet and wet is so nice, but at the same time, you have to keep your brush clean, because each time I work on top of the wet surface, my brush picks up. Color on the neck that I lay down is not something that I like, but value I like it, so I'm just going to stay with it. And then I can always paint over on top, make the final adjustment later. So I'm not too concerned at this stage if the color is not something that I like 100%, as long as drawing is accurate and value is accurate. Now, chances are when she takes a break, this folds and will change. So I'm not really too concerned about maintaining exact shape, other than the larger shapes which can be filled in and so on. So that's something that she can help, and she's not expected to exit shape. Now her cat is should pay a little more attention to this page. If I lay down initial wash, I didn't watch, so let's give some equal attention to it. So cobalt blue mostly boundary of our forehead is kind of somewhere here. So behind. And just like any other things, I'm laying down the shadow side. Add a little bit of a gradient to it. Shadow side and light side as simultaneously as I can. Break up the hard edges. Quick approach. Some sort of rim. Very strongly light on it's kind of a bluish turquoise color, tricky color. Nice challenge. So keep things down. Step back. Not really. Yeah, I can step up with that. Yes. As a base color, I can do that now. I can find it later on. I can always use the background later on if I want to cover up some extra the wash in the beginning, or I can just wipe it off while it's still wet. So there are a number of options I can choose. So for now, the main thing about the head is just to maintain the presence of such an intense color. That way, when I lay the colors on the skin tone, it doesn't lose to the intensity of head too much. So it'll stay in my peripheral vision. And then back to back to drawing. So somebody is trying to ear. My hair is supposed to come out. Come up even farther up. Just the freedom of giving the shape with the large brush, wide brush stroke is so satisfying. I like drawing working with the sharp pencil medium, like color pencil, but also the fact that I can cover larger shapes so boldly. It's so satisfying. It's actually the shadow part of it. We'll go a few more minutes and we'll take a break. That is wider than I usually lay down. Yeah, cover up every inch of the empty canvas. Kind of intentionally undefine them. That there's no sharp edges or sharp one committed area at this stage. And more or less kind of a blurred appearance, but still being accurate. That is the goal. something that people refer to loose technique. That way, when you take a look at the stage, it carries names, appearance, or proportion, and so on, without spelling out much of a detail. That's the kind of stage that I like to accomplish at stage. Then things will tighten up, and colors will be a little more defined and so on. But without jumping into that too quickly. Now, there are times that I would paint, let's say, very isolated manner, like starting off with one eye, one segment there. Again, that's not the type of kind of approach that I teach the students, or even when I was a student, or even I was a beginning painter in my early career. But by now, I can generally handle that approach. So it comes down to the person's, I guess, artistic maturity or experience level, whether one can handle those kind of isolated manner or not. They can be very detrimental if somebody who's not really experienced and they try to do that, because they might have seen very experienced artists doing that and pulling it off, but they themselves may not be the younger students that is not quite experienced yet. A lot of trouble. Even when I approach it in that manner, working very isolated manner, if something goes wrong, I always go back to the drawing board and revert back to more traditional way if things are not going right. This is a little faster than I would generally do. Time, but I think we can take a break now, give Daniel some break, and then we can talk about if Barry would like to talk about some of the images in our slideshow.
Okay. Sure. Yeah, Sue, if you would, let's get a long still close-up of the work in progress.
Okay.
Nice, thank you.
Yeah, there's something in the way. Hold on a minute. Okay.
And just a reminder to our attendees, if you have any questions, go ahead and put those in the Q&A, and we'll get to those. Don, just let me know when you'd like me to go ahead and screen share those things that you gave me.
You can do it now.
Okay, do you want to start with that short video or with the slideshow?
We can do slideshows.
Okay, I'll start with that.
These are the paintings I did with my students. I run extracurricular activity, what's called the portrait painting club, with the students every Wednesday evening. And this is a similar case. I just threw down some colors to break up the monotonous appearance of the white canvas, and told myself, let's see what comes out of it, basically. Next, please. And so now I'm approaching with a more opaque paint on top of mostly transparent colors. Clearly, he's got lots of hair, beard, and so on. And then now I'm just about to moving into opaque colors on the forehead and so on. Next, please. So now I'm laying down more of it. And so this is where the drawing has to be very critically accurate there. Next, please. And I just pretty much finished in this stage. I thought all that dripping appearance, I don't know, just looked cool, so to speak. So So this is pretty much finished. I think there's one more shot after this. Next, please. So yes, that's pretty much it, the end of it. Next, please. This one I didn't work with the opaqueness, but for some reason I felt like I like to really go with a very thick, juicy paint. So I just blocked it in, just almost like I felt like making a bread dough with the flour. I think the next one shows a little more close up of that, what thickness of the paint. Next, please. You can see more swirly brush strokes. So just a little subtleties of colors between the lower region below the nose versus the middle region that has much richness. He had a dark skin, but still dark skin person still emanates that the warmth to it. And then of course the top portion, there is more, slightly more yellowish feel to that. So I pretty much threw in thicker layer of paint, and I kind of mushed around carefully so that it doesn't turn out to be very muddy color. Next, please. So to the later stage now, highlights and details always come the last. I think there's one more close-up shot. Next one. Yes. So I used the sable brushes on the top region on the forehead, brushing from his forehead towards the hair to create illusion of a hair, as if a hair is coming out of his forehead. It just because there's enough paint on it. If I run the dry brush with the sable brush, I can create that illusion there. So more technical aspect, I guess. Okay, next, please. This is just a one-shot situation there. He had a very, very sharp features, eyes, and piercing eyes, very sharp nose, and so on. So this painting, unlike some others, has lots of, in some cases, a little overly sharp edges, but that's how I felt with his facial features. Very sharpness, like some actor feel to it. Next, please. Even the white of the eye, I usually don't go with such a strong white against the darkness of the iris, but again, it just gave me impression of very strong, sharp, contrasting appearance to it. So I just let that be with a very strong contrast. Besides that eye being near eye, I thought that I can use that as a very sharp focal point. So I let it be very sharp than some other paintings. And also the scarf itself, I wanted to have some sort of anchoring composition. So I used that diagonal direction to that. Next, please. Now it's got lots of color. Dark skinned person, they have lots of cool temperature colors coming into it. So I kind of exaggerated, so to speak, a lot of very blues, very purples, and so on, to accentuate the color, probably more than what naturally shown under that light. But I didn't care. I just like to have a lot of colors against his dark skin tone. So again, there's a larger shot. Next one, please. So that's the result of that. Next, please. He volunteered to keep his smile. I warned him, but he said he can do it. So he kept his smile the way he wanted to. So again, similar approach. I just threw down the color, but this time I didn't lay down very thickly like the second painting shown earlier. So, and he had a very, very warm body complexion. So I threw in very strong alizarin crimson color to begin with against the blueness of his beret. Next, please. So he managed to keep his smile. Not an easy thing to do. And again, that the rosiness of his cheek. So I added a lot of color and contrasting blue on his cheek and the jaw and chin line. So next, please. This is the model. Kind of similar approach. I started off with the creating the empty silhouette of the face using hat as a boundary or frame. And then after that, I move on to inside of the face. Next, please. So again, without defining anything, just filling in proportions and generalized temperatures. Some places I exaggerate to start off with, the coolness on the jaw and so on. Again, I can always shift back and forth. So it's a continuing journey of making adjustments there. Next, please. So this will be pretty much the final stage. Yes, there's a finished stage there. So I felt the rim of the hat with her blackness of the dress, nicely frames as a composition there. Next, please. The same person but different. Now here I saw a lot of the blues and grays from the beginning, so I emphasized that probably more than what I saw, and then decided to see where it goes, and I can always make adjustments there from there on. Next, please. So again, this is finished stage. I just left the top or the busy portions of the uniform just there opened up without doing much about it. Next, please. So that's the finished piece there. And the time is short, so I didn't want to just have a completely finished formal portrait appearance of toys, so I intentionally picked and chosen where I like to fill in and I like to leave open, so that I kind of think of it as a breathing in and out of canvas, between canvas and him. So some place I intentionally left open there. Next, please. It just shows different stages, the top, the left corner, and the right corner. So unlike the previous one, there is no drawing involved. Just from the beginning, I drew the shapes of color, and basically like I compared to doing a puzzle piece. Only difference here is I cut out my own puzzle pieces as opposed to puzzle pieces manufactured by the company, comes in the box, and that's the process. Next, please. So this is a very much more traditional way of laying down the drawing in the top corner, the very top one, and then you have a complete confidence in boundaries of the drawing, and you start plugging in. So this will be more closer to academic way of the painting by teaching. Even this a little more advanced level than what my beginning oil painting students would do, but still it shows more the process of a drawing laid out before filling them in with the colors. So there's a assurance and of the confines of the drawing that I know I should stay within it there. Next, please. No, I think that's it.
I think that's the end. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And would you also like me to share the video at this point, or did you want to go back to painting?
Oh, you can show the video. It's a time lapse. It shouldn't be too long. Like 2 minutes or something like that.
Okay.
Yes. It's something that the academy asked me to produce some process shot for the academy website and so on. So I had a model. And it's time lapse. So it took me about 2.5 hours. So it's gonna move fast. So you can play it now.
Okay, I'll go ahead and start that. Okay. The only other thing is I have that image. I could share that, or you could go ahead back to painting, whatever you prefer.
I can go back to painting too. Okay, so I'm going to continue to make things more accurate. Some things that I noticed from looking from the distance, and blocking further. So I'm not too much concerned about any detail that is not laid out yet. Even the detail itself is not, it's fun for sure, but it's not as difficult than this stage actually determines how painting's gonna be turning out satisfactorily or the other way around. So if I get this part done much more confidently and to my satisfaction, generally it really supports the next stage, which is secondary detail or tertiary detail after that, and so on. So this is even more difficult, I have to say. Trying to make things right, but without distracted by things that really can distract us. I continue to soften the shapes, accurate, natural, and what we talked about. So, if you have any questions, I can probably multitask and answer it while I'm doing it.
Yes, well, just a reminder, if you have questions, to go ahead and put those in the chat. People often ask about brushes. Don, if you could maybe just go over again the types of brushes and the sizes that you're using, perhaps?
Yes, I use mostly very strong, stiff and springy bristle brushes. They are made from hog hair, like these here. So those are my main workhorse at this stage. Now, as I progress towards the later stage, when things get a little more delicate, I may slowly mix up little soft hair brushes. I generally like natural hair brushes as opposed to synthetic hair. But this brush currently I'm using, it happens to be the Robert Simmons brush, or some of the Utrecht brush I like it. Their series 209 series, so I like it. So I include that as a part of the my class supply list for the students. There's so many great brushes, and some brushes can be quite expensive. So for the beginning level students, I emphasize more of a not so much of fine, expensive brushes, but more of something that will promote them to work with more paint as opposed to more technique of keeping it so subtle and soft. For that, I find the bristle brush works well. When you have very fine brushes in your hand, sometimes it can really cause you to work too refined manner before you lay down basic blockings down. So it can sometimes backfire. Next thing you know, you just keep brushing around instead of going after right color, right value, and so on. It puts the emphasis in wrong place of technical aspect so early on as opposed to the fundamental aspect of painting.
At the top of the program, you talked about your colors, but someone is also asking about the type of paint that you use, perhaps the brands.
Yes, most of my colors are, many of them are this. Winsor Newton brand, the British brand, they've been doing so many years, hundreds of years. So generally, what I tell students, if you go use their brush, their paints, generally you don't go wrong. But I also like to treat myself with some different companies, different colors. So other companies would be like my transparent oxide red is the Rembrandt brand. And also I use some Gambling brand as well. Their paints are quite nice too, good quality. Some Old Holland, good quality, but a little more expensive. So that. And pretty much those works well for me.
And when it's convenient, we'd love to see kind of a close up of your palette as well.
Should we do that
Yeah,
for next break? Or?
Yeah, maybe next break.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm still squinting my eyes quite a bit to make sure I don't get drawn into smaller details, but going after larger shapes or more impressions of shapes accurately still, than being drawn into all the sparkling nice things of the color and so on. At least not yet. Of course, we like to do that at some point. It's just a matter of timing. I think that's what counts. So when to strike and when to pull back or patiently wait for the sake of the entire painting. That way, I don't come up with one nicely done area because I spend so much time onto it, but then it doesn't make good sense with the other parts and so on. Now I'm slowly approaching and spending a little more time features. Again, if I'd chosen to work much more isolated manner, then I would finish off one eye and then move on and so on. But also I like the process of, because it's so much of the drawing here, I really love the drawing aspect of painting. In fact, the drawing aspect of the art itself. I'm kind of enjoying this process as I develop the entire face as opposed to working and finishing up too early on. It's such a very rewarding process as far as I'm concerned.
When it's appropriate, could you tell us a little bit about your use of white?
White in terms of mixing or the one aspect of what can I talk about in type of white, or where do I use white, or how much use white?
Perhaps the type of white, and perhaps if you use it on the eyes or for highlighting.
Oh, yes. There are times that I may use white, but usually not too severely. If I do, it's going to be very isolated there. Even the white of the eye itself is not, it's called the white of the eye, but often it is not. It can take on so many different colors. And also, it's one thing that one object, in this case eye, has what we call white, but it can be totally different depending on the light. So it's not so much about whether it's white or not, but what kind of light it is being influenced by. So if it's very warm light, then I may have to add a warmer mixture into it. So even the highlight, I like to work with a more off-white instead of a very stark white. Now, as I said earlier in the beginning, I've seen some great paintings where people use stark white and then put it off very well. So there's that too. And there are times, like one of the portraits I showed, that the guy with a very sharp character, the character in his face, there are the white of the eye is straight up white again, because I felt very strong about these very sharp contrasting features and so on. So never say never, but often I warn younger students not to just reach out to the white too indiscriminately. Just like black, I have no problem using black, and I do use it, but I tell them not to just use it as a shortcut to make it darker. And I feel the same way about the white. I do not want to use white as a just shortcut to make it so light. So for instance, on her nose, I can see a highlight streaking down there. It's relatively cool light. So it's very pale, kind of purplish color. So certainly it is not white. I can along the nose one breaks the plane there. I need to soften its edges. But my point here is this here, it gets quite almost like the white, but I like to give some sense of a color sense in that case. It's some mixture of because I detected some very cool temperature. I mix some purplish color on the side here, a little less strong highlight. I'm seeing more of a warmer temperature, so I mix a little bit of cadmium red, so you can see they are different. Also, I like to maintain some hierarchy amongst the highlights. So there's very strong highlight, there's kind of a medium strong highlight. So they should all play their role in working together instead of not every single highlight just screaming at each other. Kind of like, think of like actors. You have to have a main character, main actor, you got supporting actors, all the way down to extras. So they should all play their role instead of not everybody, like to become a main character, right? And that's often difficult to maintain because so many interesting things, and the more you stare at it, they seem so more accentuated, more exaggerated. So kind of fall into the deep hole of making everything so bright, so too much highlight, too big, too sharp edges. Maintaining that relationship is more important and often difficult than doing the detail for every single one of them there. But so far, I like the temperature contrast with the nice warm against the cool. I can always give some warmer color later on where the plane turns around. That way it's not so stark blue or purple. Even though if this painting is much more impressionist painting, then I would leave that as it is to rely more on color temperature and intensity, even in the shadow. But I don't think that's what the route I'm gonna go after. So I would warm up a little bit, where probably the reflected light bouncing off of her shoulder, that warms up a little bit just past her cheekbone area. But that is something that I'll break up later on. So yes.
Someone had just a quick follow-up question with the white. Do you tend to use lead or titanium white?
I use the titanium white. I know some people are very strong about feel very strong about the advantage of lead white. I did use in the past, but just trying to maintain healthy situation, safe situation. I use these days almost exclusively titanium white, no longer lead white. Again, there are some people, it's like very purists. They really swear by advantage of lead white. But we have to really think about health issues. Also, in my teaching environment, because a lot of students, they share, say, brush cleaning machine and so on. So having multiple students in collective environment, we have to be extra careful about other people as well.
Don, someone else is commenting how sculptural your painting is. This person found that taking sculpting classes was extremely helpful in making their paintings three-dimensional. And they're just wondering if you've taken sculpture classes and how that might have affected your painting.
Yes, I did take my sculpture class, but not in my undergraduate study. We didn't have an elective. Certainly, it definitely helps as far as thinking process, seeing things much three-dimensional way. So I strongly recommend. In fact, currently in the curriculum at the American Academy of Art, all the fine art majors, they have to take a sculpture class, and some people even they want to, they can take an advanced sculpture class. But being able to see very sculptural three-dimensional way is crucial for any representational painting, not just a portraiture or figure, but anything, the realistic or naturalistic or representational way, because we are dealing with a three-dimensional object. Even the human head is a three-dimensional object, so treating it that way is crucial. So I strongly recommend to take sculpture opportunity. But in my case, I didn't take it. But in my drawing class, it was so much emphasized to see things three-dimensionally. This is the part where some of the brush strokes are a little too disturbing because it reflects a lot of lights and so on. I can use soft airbrush and not to blend it, but just knock off those disturbing groove appearance to it. So I tend to use soft airbrush rather sparingly, and soft airbrush can be really addictive. Once you have it, sometimes you just don't let go. You have to yank it out of your hand. Somebody has to. And next thing you know, just engaging much more blending technique as opposed to try to focus on seeing, mixing, and laying down. Especially for the beginners, that is much more crucial and important way of learning as opposed to brushing, blending. I'm going to lay down a larger shape now that I have a more accurate boundary of a scarf or shawl. I'm going to lay down the accurate boundary of that. And now I'm getting a little more opaque, more white mixed, so not as thinned out as in the beginning stage. Since I have black, the palette, I'm going to make it down as well, just to give some support for. This is the largest brush I brought in today, number 12. And this is the part that, like one of those paintings I showed earlier, lay down relatively thickly. There is a certain sense of satisfaction. That shouldn't be something cliche technique, but without it's kind of satisfying. two brushes, one for dark green, the shadow in the face, another one for decide later which way I'm gonna run. I realized, frankly, I do not like it. I think I placed her head too far to the left, too much on this side. Oh well, that happened. In that case, in the past, what I did was, after the painting was done, I just cut off the canvas one side. It worked out. After that, the model was in better position within the canvas. I might do that for this painting. Now, some of this part I'm going back to more just to occupy and really stay with the color. If you hold the brush like upside down, it's like you create much more the flow of that, as opposed to running this way. Actually, that allows you to your color to run down more interesting way. Now it's one stage beyond the first stage before the break. So we want a little smaller parts, little more delicate areas, and also, of course, there are mistakes happen that either I didn't notice back then, or I noticed it, but I bypassed. Just keep it in the back of my head and come back. If those mistakes are not crucial, if those mistakes are something that's going to affect my next stage, then I need to fix it. But if not, I may come back, make note of it, and come back to that. For instance, here's a good tooth. Light to flatten color there. Make it a little more warmer temperature on the forehead. White much. And as light coming from our left side, I need to accentuate a little warmer temperature there. So I'm mixing more of the cadmium red colors, one warm, one cool. Okay. Then I'm going to bring the warmer temperature on the light receiving side of our face. Because I think I have a sufficient cool temperature on the shadow side, just the light side is not warm enough. So let's see. So I'm brushing over on top, which means I keep my brush clean constantly, and or limit my strokes to maybe 1 or 2 strokes and keep it there. Now that's better. So I give a little more warm. The skin appearance to it. I'm struggling to get dark on that side. Yeah, because the light reflection, I wasn't getting this area as dark as I want. So I'm going to push 1 degree higher or darker if I can accomplish that. The darks are so important. These darks and so on. I compare that to like the bones in skeleton. You gotta have a bone in order for the muscles to attach to. Or like foundations in the building, you gotta have those stairs and so on where your concrete pouring concrete can attach to. And also, if you do not put those dark enough, then you'll end up making light to too light too, which means you can easily overmix white and dilute the color too much. So you can have a quite rippling effect in other parts as well. And sometimes it all begins with not having very important strategic dark that should be there, not there, and then that actually affects your judgment in other places as well. The part that now that I'm getting into smaller details, smaller parts, that I don't overdo it.
Perhaps at some point you could tell us a little bit about your development as an artist and how you came to specialize in portraits.
Well, I'm not quite, I guess, not specialized in too much into one. It's just that I was trained from day one in my study, working with the models, figures, and faces. So naturally, that happened. And also, I just studied. So I like it so much about capturing personalities and so on. So it just came naturally as my training background, working with figure from day one of the freshman class and so on. Just so rewarding to not only just the accuracy, the likeness, let's say, which there are people who do very good work, too, but just the sense that certain unique personality or unique characteristics, like Danielle has certain very charming that is unique to her and so on. So rewarding in so many ways. So it's something that I will do for the rest of my life, even though I don't consider myself, say, portrait artist. So is my my outdoor painting. Well, it's got its very unique challenges and real aspect of it. So something that I will never stop doing, but not necessarily say, I don't know, landscape specialist. Something I don't do as often these days is at some point the still life. I used to really enjoy doing still life as well. But it's limited time. I also like other things like architectural rendering drawing. So again, pay a little more attention to our hat layer, the top portion of the canvas. So it's a little difficult to judge the height. So just like this area is main focal point here, even the hat, I need to a little more stronger emphasis on that side, either or both by emphasizing this area with more intense color and or de-emphasizing the other side. Even the best quality of paint, we have a limitation as to how intense we can create on this side. That's when this side will step up and intentionally downgrade so that this will really shine. top. So it's too much because that is the main center of interest. And capture. Shadow is not strong enough in terms of a temperature, having to be cool. So I'm mixing a little more of blue and red to cool down this temperature. But squint down the value difference between her hair, darker brown hair, and the shadow merges a little closer. And this is about the stage that now I can slowly attack, so to speak, individual features of the eyes and so on. That's when I would use a smaller brush, even the same brush at some point. So now I'm working more isolated manner. Cool down the temperature. But like still, I don't want this area pop out too much. That shouldn't compete against the other eye, That I use to sharp here using dry brush to go over a few times. One thing I do not want to do is brushing back and forth like this, but it's going to be much more careful. Once or maybe twice. Or you can also give this being the hair of the eyebrow, you can flick to it with more naturalistic appearance to break it up. Alright. And as I said earlier, when I lay something down, I'm going to take a quick look at to make sure the other one is, they are both making sense to each other, mostly position, proportion. Or in this case, 3/4 of the eyes, so both eyes should be looking in the same direction. So currently I'm looking at working this eye, but if I have third eye, I'm looking at the other eye as well. Now this one also has a very strong, the light kind of penetrating through. So that's the kind of decision I have to make. Should I really like to go with that strong light, or I'll use my artistic license and calm it down. That way, this will be more shiny. I tend to go in that route. So not necessarily it happens to be seen certain way, what I can call it accidental detail, but more of a dominant characteristics or dominant sense of design that I like to create. So in the end, if I the final version of it, that a little lighter part of the iris, I will not probably bring out that strong the way. She's got very light, pale bluish gray the iris, so you can really pop out where you may not want it to be, and this one is the case there. Now I need to use an even smaller brush. Number one. Let's see. Earlier talked about the white of the eye. Now I'm going to shape it up a little bit. Now here's the part that the anatomy part comes into play. What they're looking at. What's the part there? So, fair or not, when you do the eyes, well, really, draws attention to that and it's very charming. So certain features tend to be more important than others. And then the difficult part of that is all the smaller detail, how I can give the appearance of that without doing every detail, such as individual eyelashes and so on. So I have to be careful so that it doesn't look like one of our individual spikes of eyelashes, but appearance of that. And since my view of her is a 3/4 view, I have to be careful about making the shape of the iris accurate in a way it represents or shows slight elliptical shape as opposed to perfect circular shape according to the perspective of circle. I work on this reflected light, the light penetrating to the other side, then I'm going to tend to the other one to make sure I maintain the relationship I want. And her left eye does receive the light quite that strong angle, so it does become quite light. So I'm crank it up a little higher, but still there is not pure white. Then now she's got very strong highlight. I can use that small dot. In that case, I pick up very small amount of paint and just give that, or you can let the highlight follow the contour of a spherical shape of eyeball. In that case, it can be more like that. And once I lay down the highlight, then I have to think about, okay, that kind of a highlight, should I make the other side a little lighter, perhaps? But still, it shouldn't be as light as the highlight. So that's confusing appearance of it. Very good size, the eye. Dominating feature. This is the part that actually with even smaller brush, and I even made the more stick to steady my hand. So if I have my basic blocking in satisfying way, then this is when I can really enjoy and indulge doing this. But none of this will make sense at all if I did not have a basic blocking early on. In the finished piece, these will command a lot of attention, but underneath of that is that beginning block in larger chunks of shapes and colors that has to be there. Then I can really enjoy this process. Moving toward even lighter value in oil painting, mostly you move up towards the highlight as opposed to watercoloring. You have to save the paper, the highlight, but in oil painting, I build towards the light instead of saving the light in the beginning. I'm going to start using some soft tail brushes to tackle some delicate areas.
whenever the timing is right, we'd love to get another close-up. Someone was asking about your palette, and then maybe another long still shot of the painting as well.
That's what he spent time.
Is that good, Barry?
It is. And then someone else was asking about the palette as well. So perfect. Yeah, we can go down to that.
Also, what I do is often I would scrape off the palette with a knife to make it clean, because one way or another, those colors will creep up and make its way onto my canvas. So sometimes, especially you get tired, but sometimes you end up just mindlessly bring up the colors. So if I detect any of that sign, then even if I have some space there, I clean up the palette. That way I can have a clean slate of palette. I can focus more on clean colors. I do that more often also in landscaping, outdoor painting, where palette space is much smaller. Sometimes within the time period of 2 hour or 3 hour painting, I may end up cleaning up the palette twice, because number one, the smaller space, and also especially outdoor painting with the heat and wind and so on, your mind can really drift off, and next thing you know, just going through the motions of just bringing up the color without much determination or meaningful sense of it. And sometimes I find it helpful to keep the clean slate back to it. So sometimes I'll do that as well. We should give a break, or
You want to do a break?
Yeah.
Okay.
she's been there long enough. Thank you so much, David.
Yeah, while she takes a break, maybe you're welcome to discuss more about your process, or we could take another longer look at the painting, whatever you prefer.
Try to really get in on the eyes, because he spent so much.
I've been talking about the process itself. Maybe you want to show the longer view of the painting. And something I say to my students when I do demos, number one, I never paint that fast when I paint, but because it's demo, you have to fit in the time. To tell the students, you shouldn't paint that fast, because often they see the demo and they think, oh, that's the speed that we should paint. And I tell them, no, it's not. If I were to paint just completely focusing on it, I would take my time longer and so on. So I tell them about that. And also, because in my class, we don't talk, I tell them, I don't talk when I'm painting, because I like to really focus on it. So that's a couple of things that I have to do differently when I do demo. Number one, I paint faster than ideal situation, and number two, I talk and paint together, try to juggle two balls, which is never a good combination. And because that's what I preach to my students, to focus on painting and take your time. If things are wrong, it's perfectly okay to wipe clean and redo it. So
When you paint these are head studies.
yes,
And the ones you showed us on your slides were head studies demos.
yes.
These are informal paintings. If you did a formal portrait, would you have the background white?
Yes.
That is your interpret with the white surrounding. That is the way you present your studies.
Formal portraits, obviously, also depending on what situation is, commission piece, and then they ask for specific background and so on. I'll work much more carefully according to what was asked for. So I wouldn't paint this loose way. It's going to be much more the regimented way, especially for drawings and so on, because in that case, it's going to be more for satisfying my clients. So.
But usually your way would be with the background white.
No, usually
it is
some
finished.
tone. So
Okay.
I brought two canvases, and I was kind of debating whether I should blank canvas, white canvas, or another one that I brought in, there was already toned, and I chose this seeing very intense color of the blue against the other one that has a more neutral umbrage color. Probably it's a little more tough to pull out that intensity of the blue. So that's why last minute when she brought the hat, I changed to this white canvas.
Someone else is asking, we've noticed that you wipe your brush between colors. Is there anything on the towel, and how do you clean your brushes between light and dark colors?
Well, the ideally, if I have two brushes, I maintain one brush for light value and dark value. But especially in outdoor paintings, I may not have that many brushes. It's just what I call brush discipline. You have to constantly keep your brush clean by wiping it off. Just a clean paper towel I use to wipe it off as much as you can, and I swirl it on the terpenoid to rinse it. So clean it. So as soon as I detect my brush touched the other color, and then that's going to impact the next brush strokes, then I have to make sure it's clean, either by wiping it off or squeezing it out and so on. So, but the working wet on wet, that is crucial. It's not having that and just running the brush. Often, there are stories about you counting your brush strokes, how many times you make strokes without actually cleaning or picking up new colors and so on. And sometimes it's quite surprising. Easily it goes like 40, 50 times. I observe the students do that. So yes, keeping the brush clean is crucial in wet and wet Alla Prima type of painting.
Thank you. When someone is sitting for you, you're working with a new model, how much instruction do you give them? What do you ask them as they're posing?
Well, I've been working with so many different models so many years. So depending on the model, some are much more experienced and or from their background experience, some like dancers and actors and so on. Sometimes they fall right into that. In that case, I may not have to do much of an instruction, so to speak. But also I work with the more beginning models, or sometimes I invite lay person, so to speak, who's not a model. Then I may ask them to do this and that, a little more instruction. So it depends their experience level, and yes.
And in the slideshow, we saw a couple of 3/4 views and a couple of full front views. How do you make that determination?
I like to just mix things up. So if I painted profile view past 2 weeks and so on, then I have to mix up this time. Maybe I'll do the frontal view, whatnot. Also, depending on where the light is. And also some people, just different strengths in their, the appearance in their character. Some has very sharp profile that's very, very interesting, then I would paint profile view. Or some people has a very strong sense of presence, like the guy that I painted with a thick paint. He's got such a good solid head on his shoulder type appearance of toy. So I painted that from that viewpoint, and also that's why I work with very thick paint as opposed to the other guy with a very sharp features. I wanted to capture that very sharpness of the contours and edges and so on. So I chose. So all those things come to play. The light, individual differences. We all carry certain very interesting viewpoint from certain angle, whatnot. So even when I paint with the students, I encourage them to walk around to study the view from 180, completely from left to the right, and then choose the carefully.
Thank you. Someone is asking if you use photographs ever as you're preparing or as you're painting, and what angles you use then.
Using the photograph, yes, I have no problem using it, especially it's a commission piece, or sometimes, especially posthumous, the portrait commissions and so on, or it requires more illustrative nature or the time. So there are many cases that has to be worked out that way. But as a last resort, like recently, somebody was inquiring about having a portrait commission done and asked about his 3 kids, and I told him that if they can tolerate, it's old enough to tolerate sitting still. It's always best to paint from life. Nothing is better than that. But again, because of circumstances, sometimes you have to work with the photo references, or sometimes it combine. You start off with blocking or beginning stage so that you can capture the color and your impression and so on. But photographs can be really helpful to capturing structural details and so on. So sometimes I combine them together. And the second question, I forget what was that you asked.
I believe they were asking if you used particular angles in the photographs.
No, not really. I would take into consideration same consideration that I would do when I face the model as to, okay, what are the strongest impression I'm receiving? What are the very strong characteristics of that particular model and so on? Then, because after next to the painting from life, the next best thing would be taking your own photographs, and that's what I would take into consideration depending on the model, their appearance, and so on.
Great, thank you so much. I don't think we have any other questions at the moment, so if you wanted to finish with the painting, at least as far as we're going to progress with it tonight.
How much time, how late are we going?
8:30.
8:30, okay, sure. Then let's do one more session. Sure. So let's do that. So here, trying to detect any mistakes and proportion issues. I think I can go with a little the proportion issues on her chin. So especially in after the long break, or not just the portraits, but also like figure paintings and so on, in like class setting where you are done for the week and you have to come back and 2 days later at the weekend. What I encourage the students to do is don't go right into smaller parts and try to fix such very small things. Rather try to take advantage of the longer break time, even just now, like 20, 15-minute break, that take advantage of your fresh eyes. Because earlier, when I was so engaged in smaller part, I'm kind of drawn into such a smaller areas, I may miss the big forest. So take full advantage of your freshness of the eyes and go after some larger adjustments, touch-ups, and so on before you zoom back into smaller parts. And so take advantage of the time break you had. So at this stage, I'm going to go after work out just the softening things up and any obvious, very obvious mistakes. One of those mistakes, how did that happen type of mistakes? Before I get into smaller parts there. So one thing I noticed that is the boundary of this, basically the drawing issue, proportion issue. So I need to bring this up a little bit. So that's eventually that's where the little bit of reflect light's gonna occupy here. So I'm not going back to smaller, even though there are things that I need to work on the eyes again, but I'm not gonna jump right into that. Kind of like visually warming up and picking things up. Edges. Picking up any loose colors that is not doing its job. And also, I'm increasingly a little bit more and more using the soft hair brushes, because now I'm slowly moving into realm of subtleties, like she has a very strong warm color here. I thought I warmed it up, but it doesn't look like it. And I'm detecting more of a green on her, on this area called overhang area there. Too strong, but and also in oil painting, developing very light-handed touch is very useful and crucial. So because I'm working on top of the wet surface, if I don't work lightly, then my bristle of the brush will dig into it. So you have to be careful. But once you develop the quality, then you can do so much things, so many nice things. So right now I'm letting the redness sit on top of the boundary between light and shadow. So kind of like gently mingling in or almost like glazing. But that is possible if you can run your brush very lightly and clean brush. It's the shape of the shadow here. Again, I'm dealing with the smaller and smaller shapes here. So from about this time forward, those collection of smaller shapes, that takes more accuracy. They will all help and make sense. Accentuate too much. This color is not clean enough on her wing of the nose. I'm painting over to make it a little more ruddy and clean. Very delicate plane changes on the nose there. So subtle enough for me to, instead of actually running the brush, I'm kind of twirling my brush to create the contour from the twirl. So that kind of gives a smaller area, same here. There we go, that's better. Okay. The light is not set up that high. Actually, model stand is relatively tall. So as a result, even the upper lip is receiving the light relatively strong. So I need to enhance the color of the upper lip. In a more natural light, where the light is much higher, set up higher, then obviously upper lip is going to be more in deeper shadow. But because model stand is quite elevated, her upper lip also receives the light quite a bit. So I need to lighten up. And put some color. Entrance of too dark and too big. Smaller parts there. And earlier I talked about little reflect light on the side, the lower side of the cheek. Now I think I should do that. So very cool purplish shadow. Just clean things up. But then as soon as it turns around, it's got a little warmer temperature. A little lighter in value too, but if I make this area too light, it can have an effect of breaking up the foam. So instead of going with a lighter value, I'm going to rely on more warm temperature change. That way, it will still indicate the plane breaks and reflect light, but without breaking up the value. So now there's a slightly warmer temperature. So just a light bouncing off of that area there. That gives more luminous appearance to your shadow. Instead of just making pitch black, pitch dark, within it, in very measured way, give sense of reflect light without breaking up the value. And give a more luminous and three-dimensional appearance of toy. And same with the neck. Earlier, I brought the contrast between neck and the shadow on the neck and the hair very tight, but there is still reflect light. So I'm going to brush in very carefully, very small amount. So these are now working much smaller areas there. Transition happening between chin and jaw. So here is a chin right here. The transition kind of expresses itself with a cooler temperature shift. So I'm mixing some blue, but I mix too bright, too light in value. So I'm going to darken it and see if I can brush in here. There we go. Transition. So that jaw doesn't suddenly become chin, but there's a transition happening, moving from jawline to chin line there. So coloration. So that in the end, I like to avoid too much monochromatic color scheme of, say, darker orange against the lighter orange, or darker ochre against a lighter ochre. But beyond that, the colors of the blues and greens and so on. And sometimes I do exaggerate if I feel like making much more colorful painting. Not really pushing that much in this painting, but sometimes I feel like doing it and I do that. So I'm going to pretty much bring the eyes to the finished stage this time. This is the part that I can lay down the color for now, and then I can come back later on with a very soft savory brush and run the dry brush over it to give the sense of the hair. Otherwise, it can easily look like eyebrow was taped on her face or drawn in with a marker appearance of toy. So you have to be careful about that. Now that the space of her upper eyelid is a little too bright, it comes out too forcefully. So I'm going to calm that down a little bit right here. Okay. So I'm going to go with a little subdued color. Pick up some too light. And then I'm going to accentuate that. Maybe I can use very tiny small brush. So in the beginning, I often compare to like construction. In the beginning, you work with the bulldozers and what are some other big heavy machineries, and I work with the big brushes. But in the end, you bring up the smaller equipments to do the fine job of that. And this is about that stage. And her left eye, as I said earlier, it does deserve to be a little extra. Not so much detailed, but I like to use the term defined. This being near eye and main focal point. And she has a very strong the eye shape. So that's one of the main things that I felt from the very beginning when she came in. So it does, her eye, especially her left eye, deserves to be more accentuated. Her right eye, even though I do see quite strongly, I may underdevelop so that it'll support the other eye better. Now this part right here is called caruncle. It's wet and very red, warm area. Often they catches the highlight. So I'm going to provide some warm red, the red color first, and then I'm going to punctuate that with the highlight, but that highlight has to maintain its place so that it doesn't compete against these highlights of the nose. That is more than enough. So whenever I work on one highlight, I look around and check other highlights to maintain proper relationship. So when I do this, I take a look at other highlights, make sure they stay in their rightful place there. And often the low eyelid that can also capture very strong highlights there. You can do that. Now let's take care of the other eye a little more. Because of she has very pale iris, it can easily show like the rim. It's called the limbic circle, something like that. Almost like the rim appearance of it. But again, you have to be careful. If you go too strong with it, it can look so drawn into it. So you have to be careful not to overdo it. But that's what happens with a very light valued eyes. People who have very light valued eyes and then receiving the light in a certain way, light practically penetrates and escapes to the other side as light is coming from upper left corner and moving on to lower right corner. Now that eyelash is a little too strong. I need to pick that up later on. So for now, even the small spaces, the upper eyelid, since this being three-dimensional, it's going to have you can give a slightly different value where that right here is going to be lighter, but not that much. By doing so, you're creating the illusion that the skin of the eyelid is over on top of the round object that we call the eye or eyeball. Now, seeing more intense color. So now I'm really moving on to higher level of light, so to speak. Now this is where you have to be careful because I see so many of them, I can easily try to do all of them. And that's when I have to pause and think about how essential those are. Just because it's there doesn't mean they are going to be essential or contributing to the entire picture. In that case, then they may play their role better by not coming out too strong there. This eye, on one hand, it should not be too forthcoming, but at the same time, it should still have a general sense of accuracy. So I'm going to draw the contour of her brow ridge, that area from outside. So that's better. Even that has slightly lighter reflect light there, but again, be careful not to overdo that. And that is a little too thick. So I need to cut into that a little bit. And I can actually bury that in the shadow more completely. Talking about right here. She has a very strong contour here, so I think that's worth it. Because that's one of her main characteristics worth emphasizing. So that deserves to be a little hard edges. So because of that, I press down my brush a little firmly to create those harder edges. As opposed to some other areas earlier, I just ran my brush, just skip over on top. But here, I want to create very strong hard edge, so I press down my brush very hard onto it. So I think that combining that shadow is a better choice. sure this doesn't look like tape. Now this tend to be right, the brow ridge tend to receive strong light. So again, I'm building towards the light. And also painting a little thicker. In oil painting, you paint from thin to thick. So in the beginning, since it's very loose and very thin, and now if I want to, I don't have to, but if I want to, I can work a more stylistic approach of more impossible if I want, or even knife at some point. Smaller and smaller shapes of the structure and color. Picking up any mistakes there. Now here's the part, even though there's a little highlight there, the chin is the part that you don't want to bring out too much. Basically, this more protruding area is going to be forehead and her nose. I consider it to be mountain coming out from the earth. Now chin, you don't want to overtake that topography that I'm going after there. Certainly it's a little lighter than surrounding area, but not to a point it's going to compete against the other parts there. Her ear nicely recede in the back instead of smoothing out some unnecessary rough edges. There's a difference between that and blending. I'm not going into blending, but keeping things smooth where it should be. Also picking up any what I call loose brush strokes. Here I can disappear into that. So any color created by unintentionally or unnecessarily as a result of loose strokes that was not carefully laid down. I'm picking those things up, but not blending it. Here I'm making her ear edge much smoother than actually I'm looking at. Attempt to make it recede. Because after all, her ear is farther away deep into the space. In some places I intentionally just break up the edges. It's more of a stylistic approach, but put on the shadow on the forehead a little bit. Already that will make the light on the forehead a little warmer. So if I make this area a little cooler by adding more purplish color, that's going to make this area look warmer without actually doing anything or laying down any warm color. Even cooler. reaffirming or punching in those very small thin darks that I had before, but with all the additional colors and so on, sometimes they get washed off. I just need to pick them back up. So here, it's purplish. Colorful there. So just gonna smooth them up, all that. That way, the deep shadow part of the head doesn't reflect any light from grooves or brush strokes. So that's where this soft hair brush works so nicely. I'm just knocking off the grooves, just barely skimming right over on top. Same here, that's very strong brush strokes that I do not want. Just go over. Not to blend it, but just knock down the ridges of the brush stroke. That way, light doesn't come out strongly from the shadow. That one makes sense. If I was cerulean blue, that probably get closer to the local color of hair, but not necessary. Or beginning marks, I can either hide it or I can. If these are really bothersome to me, I can always wet down my rag and erase it while it's still erasable. Or sometimes I just leave it alone, or sometimes I can cover it up. So there are a number of options. Or sometimes I can create some background to cover on top. So there are a number of options. I can take care of that. So that's why I wasn't so much concerned about all that dripping and so on. Sometimes that can be very interesting, but sometimes that's kind of off the top stylistic. Then I can always erase them or cover them up or make something different out of it. So that's again one of the so many nice things about the oil painting, the flexibility and so forgiving. So that is pretty much the stage where I would start knocking down one individual feature at a time to bring it to the finish. Until that time we want to that stage.
Yeah, I think we're about out of time, right, Barry?
Yes, so perhaps if we can get one more long still shot close.
Sure.
What I'm going to try to get as close as I can, and I'm going to try to focus on the eyes.
Sounds good.
The only thing is there's kind of a glare.
That's the downside.
Yeah, there's a glare because of the lights. But when Don's done, he's going to send you a photo of the complete painting.
Perfect. Yes, we always ask our artists if they're willing to go ahead and bring the piece to fruition as far as they'd like to take it. And then if you can send me that image, then we can attach that to the end of the recording for everyone to see. So that would be wonderful. Thank you so much. We certainly want to thank Don and the model and the DuPage Art League for all of your time, for generously putting this together for us. I will be sending out the links several links, including the DuPage Art League, Don's website, and a couple of other things in an email later tonight. If you are watching the recording of this presentation, you may request those resource links by emailing me at ce@wheatonlibrary.org. That's CE for Community Engagement at wheatonlibrary.org. The recording of this program will be available on the library's YouTube page within about a week. So with that, again, thank you to everyone involved. Thank you to our attendees. Everyone take care and have a great evening. Hope to see you again soon. Good night.